Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul. Now, today I'm doing a little update of some films I've watched over the last week or so. There have been no videos from me for nearly a week, and if you're wondering why, it's because I just wasn't in the mood, to be honest. It's very wintry, it's very cold. I don't function very well in January. I sort of go into a closed-down mode. Yeah, it's just not my time of year. So I don't feel very creative, I don't feel very active, so I tend to just sort of roll up and curl up in a ball and wait until March, really. But I have watched a few films this week, so I thought what I would do a quick review, a quick catch-up of those films that I've seen, and a little bit at the end about the future of this channel as we head into 2024. Welcome back. So the first film which I want to talk about is one of the most bizarre films I have seen in a very long time, and I'll be very surprised if this isn't right up at the top of my list of favourite films of 2024. When we get there at the end of the year, if this channel is still there, it probably will be. It's called Poor Things. It's directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who you will probably know from the Oscar-winning The Favourite a few years ago, and his earlier film The Lobster. It was written by Tony McNamara, who also wrote The Favourite. And I think I've come to the conclusion after watching this film that Yorgos Lanthimos is probably my favourite director at the moment. He makes very, very odd films. If you've seen either of his two previous films, let alone Poor Things, you will know what I mean. He makes films which are very different to the Hollywood mainstream, and yet they sort of ingratiate themselves into the box office and find an audience. And of course, as I said, The Favourite was a very popular choice a few years ago and won Oscars and BAFTAs and God knows what. So even though he makes films which are very much off the mainstream, he sort of gets into the mainstream and he makes these films which connect with people, possibly because it's just so different. His films are very awkward and angular and bizarre, very strange direction and intriguing narratives, to say the least. And I think that's what works with them, because even though stories are at best perverse, they seem to connect, and they seem to have a narrative through line that makes them absolutely fascinating to watch. And this is the third time he's done it for me, certainly. This is a terrific film, which absolutely captivated me through its entire running length of 2 hours and 20 minutes. You know what it's like? Sometimes you go and see a very long film, and no matter how good it is or it's going to be, it takes you a few minutes to get into the zone. You might find yourself drifting before it connects. But this, I was sort of in straight away, grabbed me, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. It's the story, basically, of a woman called Bella Baxter. It's set ostensibly in the Victorian era, but it's slightly different Victorian era to the one that we know. But it sort of resembles it. Bella is played by the brilliant Emma Stone, who gives an astonishing performance in this film. She plays Bella Baxter. She's a young woman who is ostensibly the ward of a disfigured and eccentric scientist called Godwin Baxter. She calls him God, which is sort of appropriate because he created her. Her backstory is that she was a woman in Victorian London who committed suicide. She was pregnant. He rescued the body. She was dead, but he managed to extract the brain of the baby and put it in Bella's body. As a result, Bella, when we meet her, is like a child. She toddles around, she knocks things over, she's curious about everything. She can't walk properly, she can't talk properly. Godwin enlists the help of one of his students, Max McCandles, played by Rami Youssef, to sort of watch her and observe her and make note of her progress, because even though she's got a baby's brain, that brain is growing and learning and adapting as Bella slowly becomes more adult in her ways. She becomes so adult in her ways, however, that she falls under the influence when she's sort of, I suppose you could call her grown up. She has an adult mentality, but she's very naive and very unsophisticated about the ways of the world. And she meets up with a rakish, rather eccentric man about town called Duncan Wedderburn, played by Mark Ruffalo. Yes, it's your actual Hulk. He sort of seduces her and leads her off to crave adventure, to crave exploring the world, even though Godwin doesn't want her to, doesn't think that she should. He can't stop her. She goes off with him on a world cruise, and they have some bizarre and very physical adventures, shall we say. They end up in Paris, where she becomes a prostitute. Duncan has a nervous breakdown because he can't cope with her eccentricities. And she eventually finds her way back to London, where she discovers the truth about herself and the truth about who she was before she died. It's just an incredible, magnetic film that you really can't take your eyes off. It's beautifully filmed. Starts off in black and white. There's lots of weird camera angles. Lanthimos uses like a fisheye lens in lots of scenes, which gives it a sort of a disconnect from reality. It's sort of real and unreal at the same time. It's a hyper reality, I suppose, of this Victorian era, which never quite existed, but very, very like the one that we know. It is a take on Frankenstein, obviously. It's a bizarre sort of steampunk science fiction thing is the best way to describe it. And I think that's how I described it in my review. Currently online at starburstmagazine.com. It's just enthralling. It's bizarre. It goes to some very, very strange places. It doesn't leave much to the imagination in terms of Bella's exploits when she discovers herself. But the performances are just astonishing. I mean, Emma Stone is going to just scoop up every award going because it's such a brave performance, because she really exposes herself in every way to the camera, and it's fearless, an absolutely fearless performance. Willem Dafoe is so terrific as Godwin Baxter. Remy Youssef is charming as Max McCandles. Mark Ruffalo is terrific as Wedderburn, who's completely outwitted by Bella when they go on their little journey. It's just an extraordinary, bizarre film, and it's a terrific film to start off the year because it gets you back into going to the cinema without seeing one of the fairly typical sort of low-key blockbusters that they sort of ease out at this time of year. Hollywood tends to put out these little films that they don't expect to do very well, but they hope might make a little bit of money. And this is just, it is a masterpiece. It really is one of the most bizarre but enthralling and charming and disturbing films I've ever seen. And because of that, I give it 10 out of 10. I can't really fault it. It's absolutely fantastic. That's in cinemas now. Poor Things by Yorgos Lanthimos. A couple of online films which I watched. One on Netflix. In fact, they're both on Netflix, come to think of it. One is excellent, one ain't. First up, we have Society of the Snow. This is directed by J.A. Bayona. You will know him from, I think, the middle of the most recent Jurassic World trilogy. You will possibly best know him from The Impossible, his film which he did a few years ago based on the 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami in Thailand, which was disastrous and devastating. And it showed his flair for creating these sort of modern disaster movies, if you like, based on true stories. This is based on a 1972 incident where a Uruguayan aircraft flying from Uruguay to Chile crashed in the Andes due to a number of things: poor weather, turbulence, and the inexperience of the co-pilot who misread the coordinates of where they were. They crashed in the Andes. The plane's wings were sheared off. It crashed in the Andes, absolutely in the middle of nowhere, in the most remote place it could possibly land. Aboard this plane were a number of members of a Uruguayan rugby team who were going to Chile, I think, to play against an English rugby team, I understand. Plane crashes, many are killed outright. It's bitterly cold. As time passes, more die from the extreme cold. Their food supplies are very, very low, and more of them succumb to their injuries, succumb to the conditions, but there's a core of them who are left, core of this rugby team, who are determined one way or another to survive. One of their most pressing concerns, of course, is food, because they haven't got any. They do the unthinkable. There are dead bodies frozen in the snow, and they resort to cannibalism to stay alive, because they need the protein from the flesh. It's a shocking decision to have to make. Some of them can't face it. Some of them can't bring themselves to eat their colleagues and their family members. But a lot of them realise it's the only way they can get through this bitter winter. And when spring comes, they might be able to find a way to Chile, which they think is nearby. They don't know exactly where they are. They've got a radio that they've managed to connect. They can hear that the rescue missions have been called off because the weather's so bad and there's no way of finding them. And you will know from the true story, because this has been filmed before in 1993 in Frank Marshall's film Alive, which tells the same story. But it's such a compelling story. It's such a terrifying story that it bears retelling. And J.A. Bayona does it with a real, almost like a documentary style. There's no judgment. You know, we know what they've had to do. He doesn't dwell on that. There's no graphic scenes of them, you know, indulging. They're just nibbling away at little chunks of flesh. And we know where it's come from, but we don't have to see it in great detail. But there's no judgment. This is what they have to do in this desperate situation to stay alive. And eventually they are, you know, those who have survived through this are recovered thanks to the bravery of the two of them, who just trek into the unknown to try and find their way back to civilization. Again, this is a long film, about 2.25 hours. It doesn't feel it though, because you get so invested in these characters, you get so invested in the situation, and knowing it's a true story as well. This is based on a book by one of the survivors, I think. This is pretty much true. And it's an astonishing tale of survival. And we do seem to be fascinated by those sort of tales of people surviving in hostile conditions. If you think back to things like Lost on television, Yellow Jackets, the TV series, which is actually inspired by this true life story. And there's a recent series on Paramount Plus with Sheridan Smith, which is a bit more of a thriller potboiler called The Castaways, about a plane that crashes on the desert island. It is a fascination, those sort of survival stories. And when they're done well, they are absolutely fascinating. And this is done as well as any I've ever seen. And this is Society of the Snow, which is on Netflix now. I'm going to give that 9 out of 10. The third film I watched because it sounded quite interesting. I liked some of the cast. Turned out to be not so good. It's called Lyft. It's also on Netflix. It debuted last week. It's a sort of a heist thriller, which stars Kevin Hart, who's not somebody I have a lot of time for normally because he's very shouty and very overexcited and very full of himself. Also stars an actress, Gugu Mbatha-Raw. Doctor Who fans will remember her as Martha's sister in Doctor Who back in, 2008. She's gone on to have a pretty spectacular career in Hollywood now and on stage. She's quite a respected actress. And she's very good. She's very good in this, but it's beneath her. This sort of film, unfortunately, is a bit beneath her. Also stars Jean Reno, who we don't see enough of, playing a villain called Lars Jorgensen. This film, I can best describe this as a feature film version of Hustle. If you remember the old BBC TV series about this team of charming grifters working around London, who, almost like modern-day Robin Hoods, swindle the rich to sort of help the poor, and themselves, of course. This is very much in that style, in every way, really. It's directed by F. Gary Gray, who over the years has directed lots of music videos. He's directed films like Men in Black International a few years ago. He directed the remake of The Italian Job. He's a workmanlike director. He handles this quite well, but it's something and nothing. The basic story is that Kevin Hart is Cyrus. He's the leader of this bunch of grifters who are well established as the film starts. Hot on his tail at an auction in Venice is CIA Interpol agent Abby, played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw. She inevitably has had a previous involvement with him, a brief romantic fling with him, but now they're on opposite sides. There's quite an exciting water chase around Venice, which makes you think, oh, this is going to be quite interesting, quite high octane. Unfortunately, it then sort of dips quite a bit. There's a lot of sort of stuff about setting up the plot and moving the people into position, and because of their position as these grifters, they're given the opportunity to be let off from their past misdemeanors if they help recover this stash of gold bullion that's being transported by this terrorist group run by Jean Reno's character, which involves lots of flying about and manipulating planes and hovering about planes under planes and attacks on planes and this sort of stuff. And there's an action sequence at the end, which is quite exciting, quite well staged. But it just feels a bit dreary and a bit drab. I mean, the problem is, these characters have a backstory that we're not familiar with because we haven't seen any previous film or any previous adventure with these people. And you sort of think, well, why do I care? Why do I care about these people in this rather bland, superficial, glossy film? It's an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes, so doesn't outstay its welcome. And it's quite well shot. Apparently it cost $100 million. I don't really see that on the screen, to be honest, because a lot of it was filmed in Ireland, standing in for London, quite obviously. And then you've got this sort of location stuff. I don't know if the air stuff is all CGI. If it is, it's very good. But it just didn't connect with me. I wasn't really hugely invested in it. But I was invested in it enough to just let it play out. I didn't turn it off. Like I say, it's quite tense at the end with the final battle to try and regain control of this bullion. But it's something and nothing, really. It sort of tries to set itself up for a sequel, but there's not really enough meat on the bones there to sort of drag it out to another one, I wouldn't have thought. That's Lyft, which is on Netflix now, if you fancy something real mind-off stuff. I'm going to give that a 5 out of 10. Right, those are the films I've watched over the last few days. A little bit about the channel and going forward through to 2024, hopefully. Having a little think over the last few days. One of the reasons I didn't do any videos is I didn't, not that there was nothing I wanted to do a video about, but I think my enthusiasm waned a bit. After all the excitement of the end of last year with rundowns of the year and all the Doctor Who stuff, which did quite well and got me some new subscribers and a bit of interest. Things have flattened a bit and I've lost a few subscribers again now. So I thought, well, instead of chasing things, and I think YouTube is about a lot of people chasing, like and subscribe and do this, do that. And And that's not what I'm here for. I'm just here. I do this for me and for you people who enjoy it, hopefully. But I'm not necessarily chasing thousands of subscribers. And, if that happens, that would be great. But I just thought I'll keep things ticking over. So what my plan is, instead of sort of desperately throwing stuff online for the sake of it, I'm hoping to get 2 videos out a week. And I think I said this sometime last year, but now it's going to be 2 videos, more if something exciting happens or there's something I want to talk about. But it'll be 2 videos a week rather. And if you want to like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. Please stick around. Hopefully you'll find this content interesting and informative in some way. I'm not one of the young thrusters, YouTube influencers. I'm just this guy who likes talking about films and TV and things he's interested in. And it would be nice to have a few of you on board as well. So on that bombshell, like and subscribe. Stick around if you've just discovered this and think this seems okay. Press the like and press subscribe. That would be really nice. I would like to get a few more subscribers. As I say, they sort of went up a bit. And now they're dipping down a little bit. But that makes you realise that to keep these things going, you've got to keep the content up day after day, and that's not something that I'm going to do. But if you don't mind subscribing to somebody who posts occasionally, I'm your man. Right, I will see you soon. I'm not sure what's coming up next. It is a quiet time of the year, but there will be more videos soon. So look out for the next drops from my world of stuff. Until I see you next time, keep taking this down.